Lord Jehovah, you reign forever. Oh Lord Jehovah, you reign, you reign. Oh Lord Jehovah, you reign forever. Oh Lord Jehovah, you reign, say.
Oh Lord Jehovah,
you reign forever.
you reign
Oh
forever.
Lord, you
Oh
reign,
Lord Jehovah,
you reign, you reign. Give him glory,
oh Lord Jehovah,
give him praise.
you reign
You
forever.
reign, you reign.
I love this song. I love this CD. If you haven't gotten it yet, it's Jody Littman. And she's done a couple of albums, actually. And she's been on the show, and she's an old friend of mine. Although we're very young, she's an old friend of mine. And she's no longer with us, but I love to honor her because she was such an awesome psalmist and songstress. I'm not even sure of the technical term, but that girl can sing. I'm just saying. All right, so welcome to another edition of Cassie Live. Of course, we presented by Praise TV. Thank you so much for joining us again this week, this month, I should say. So I have missed you so very, very much, and hopefully you had an opportunity to join us in December for our special show where we actually had Curtis Drake Shepherd here, and we were talking about the entire Me Too movement. If you missed it, you can find it online on our YouTube page, or you can find us on Facebook. But before we get too far into this, of course, I need to usher in the presence of the Lord, because without him, we are nothing, but with him, we can do all things. So we just pray that this show be a blessing to you. If you don't mind praying with me, please. Lord Jesus, whew, thank you. Thank you that I can exhale, dear Lord. Thank you, dear Lord, for appointing me to the Cassie Project, dear Lord. Just thank you for an opportunity to speak to your people as a whole, Heavenly Father. Thank you for this platform. Not everyone has an opportunity not everyone has an opportunity to spread your word over the airwaves. So we thank you for this opportunity. My guest here today, dear Lord, they are here in a capacity to help. We have our artistic guest, and we also have a therapist here on set with us today, dear Lord. I just pray that the viewers have an opportunity to get something from this message, dear Lord. I did invite her for selfish reasons. However, I know that we all need a little inside information. So I just thank you, Lord, for your blessings, and ask that the words of my mouth honor you. In your name, we praise you and we love you, Lord. Amen.
Amen.
I done got a little tongue-tied. Okay. So I'm so happy to be back with Cassie Live and our guest tonight. Actually, you know that song, It's a Small World After All? It's like I have to sing that every time I get a guest on the couch, because we find some sort of connection. It's just something like we didn't know each other from a box of rocks when we met, and now we're like, oh yeah, well I did this and we know her and blah, 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 blah. So without further ado to you all, we hope that you are enjoying your new year. But without further ado, let me introduce our guest, Miss Denisha Burnett, with a lot of alphabet soup behind her name. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And now you can tell us your official name and title in alphabet soup.
So as you said, my name is Denisha Burnett, and I am a licensed professional clinical counselor.
Okay.
That means I'm independently licensed in the state of Ohio. I also am a consultant, and I'm a professor at Xavier University. I also have my own company called The Crown, which focuses on mental health, education, and empowerment and consulting, as well as I have a women's organization called The Queen Size Mission, and our focus is on empowering women and young ladies to fulfill their royal identity and all of their God-given purpose.
Well, thank God that you found time to come sit on the couch with us.
I wouldn't have missed it for the world.
We've been trying to get you on here since, was it
October, November, I think.
Okay.
We were scheduled for November.
Yeah, because we met at the conference. We met at a women's conference. You've got a lot going on. I think we need to touch on some of all of that.
Okay.
But the reason I invited her initially is because we were at a women's conference, and I love to attend those. I love the empowerment. I love women coming together to make themselves better and stronger. And as you know, the Cassie Project is keeping all survivors safe, informed, and emancipated. Now, we are a non-clinical initiative. However, we, of course, work with and are able to refer you to clinicians when you are ready. And you didn't initially say therapist. You said you are a licensed
professional clinical counselor, which is a big term to say therapist.
Okay. But you know what? That term therapist is what I was saying. That turns some people off. Mm-hmm. So if you say, hey, I have this therapist, why don't you, nope, nope. But if you say counselor, or something like that, it's a little more user-friendly. Mm-hmm. Have you found that to be a truth with people that you work with?
I think it has a lot to do with people's frames of references. So based on maybe their schooling or their education, most people are familiar with a guidance counselor.
Okay.
So that might feel a little bit more open, or sometimes people have gone to a massage therapist or a physical therapist. So usually it's about people's experiences, but I don't usually find that people are adverse to, they either love both terms or they hate both terms.
Okay. So in comparison to a life coach, is that the same, or is that just another name for it? Do you guys do different things?
It's not the same.
Okay.
As a therapist, we might do similar things that a life coach would do, but a therapist has more levels of training and degrees than a life coach has.
Yeah.
There may be some overlap, but there are certain things that a life coach can't do. For example, I can diagnose and treat. A life coach is probably going to help you prioritize your life, maybe set some goals, set some steps to take the goal. But in terms of actually offering treatment and care, a life coach can't do that.
When you say treatment, you can write prescriptions?
No. I can write a treatment plan based on what your needs are. So, for example, cognitive behavioral therapy or dialectical behavioral therapy are forms of treatment. So if a person has major depressive disorder, if a person is going through marital issues, so there are certain interventions that you will use. A doctor or someone who is licensed as maybe a nurse practitioner or something like that can write prescriptions.
Okay.
Therapists cannot unless we have that training and that licensure.
Okay. So what really excited me when I heard you speak was the way that you were speaking about survivors of sexual and domestic abuse and the trauma. You know, we do use the term PTSD, but just saying trauma as a whole, I mean, we have been traumatized.
Absolutely.
And it affects us, you know, our entire being, I think. And then, of course, if we get to the point where we are able to speak to a counselor, a licensed counselor, or a therapist, then we are stuck in a place. And so she was speaking on trauma and how it affected us, and I felt like she was like all in my head, all in my business. And I'm like, whoa, I really, really would love for her to speak to our viewers, our followers, just so that they can get a clue, because a lot of things you said, I was like, really, wow, is that why I do this? And is this? So I guess we're going to have like an unofficial therapy session, not necessarily for me, but for the masses, but just the questions about the things that you were speaking on at the conference. Okay, so where do we start? Okay, you just got back from doing a trauma workshop or retreat. What was that you did?
So for one of my other jobs, I'm a consultant for a trauma-informed, trauma-responsive program out of New York. Okay. And so we contract with different agencies, schools, any places that provide usually human services, residential programs, hospitals, and we look at the impact of trauma and how trauma impacts us at an individual level, but also at an organizational level. Okay. So I was teaching and training in Pittsburgh on Thursday and Friday, and then I flew in and I was teaching in Kentucky on the impact of trauma and how essentially trauma changes our worldview. So the best thing that we can do is be informed about how trauma changes us so we can be proactive and manage or mitigate those changes. So you use the words PTSD. PTSD is an actual diagnosis. However, you don't necessarily have to qualify or have the criteria for that diagnosis to have been impacted by trauma. Trauma impacts us all. How it impacts us is the continuum of whether or not you end up in a category that might fall under the PTSD diagnosis.
Okay. Let me ask you a question about that, because I have, I guess I recently started using the term relating to us, to survivors. Okay. And I had heard other people mention it, and I, read it in some of my research and my works and things like that. But you said that it's actually, it needs to be diagnosed.
Correct.
Okay. So if I am affected by multiple triggers, if I am depressed and anything of that sort, I mean, if I'm having issues sleeping or things like that, from something that happened when mine started when I was 5. So when something that happened as far back as over many, many decades,
just a few decades.
Can I say that, or do I have to go to? Can I say, I have PTSD, or do I have to go to a doctor for that?
I personally, as a member of the field, don't want people to say they have PTSD.
Okay.
So that would be the same as if you go to the doctor. You might have a cold, you might have pneumonia, you might have the flu, and based on certain symptoms, they will diagnose what you have. Is it cancer? Is it a stomach ulcer? So there are specific criteria that is used in the clinical profession to identify what a person might have. The reason diagnosis is important is because if we don't know what we're treating, then we don't know how to treat it. Trauma, and I'll talk about this in a little bit more, there is an impact of trauma that is not necessarily meeting the criteria of PTSD.
Okay.
So PTSD stands for post-traumatic stress disorder. You can absolutely be impacted by trauma and still not meet the criteria for PTSD. So just a little bit of information with the new diagnostic manual that they're looking for to come out next. They want to have a diagnosis that still captures that, but that does not rise to the level of PTSD. So some of the names are around like complex trauma stress or things like that, where it's not a person who's having nightmares and flashbacks, a person who is not having or reliving those visceral emotions, a person who does not necessarily have anxiety, panic attacks, life alterations to avoid those cues, a person who does not necessarily have that emotion dysregulation, but they absolutely had a traumatic experience happen in their lives.
Okay.
So everyone who has trauma does not have PTSD.
Okay.
Everyone who has PTSD has experienced a trauma.
Okay.
So there's a definition of trauma. And Bessel van der Kolk, who's the leading doctor around this subject, describes trauma as when you have had a event that your internal and external resources were not enough to manage. So an example of that is you and I might be in the same car accident. If I've already lost 4 people that year, if I already maybe have depression, if I already don't have car insurance and that was my only ride to get where we needed to go, maybe you have stable mental health, you have resources, you have a job that's going to pay you to be off of work. That same car accident might impact us differently based on my internal and external resources. So what can be traumatic for one person may not be as traumatic for the next person, which is, again, why we have to be very careful with saying things like this person has PTSD. Gotcha. Again, all trauma does not lead to PTSD, and it's really important to make sure that we don't even fragilize survivors and say they have PTSD. They may be struggling, but they may not have any kinds of nightmares or flashbacks, or they're able to still function and go to work and do the things that they need to do. Not that they weren't impacted, just not to that same or nth degree.
So that means I owe y'all an apology, because I was using that term all willy-nilly. Like, you know, all of us had it. And of course, I know that different people are affected differently by the types of trauma that they have experienced. And that leads to another question. I was curious. For a long time, I didn't really talk about what happened to me when we were, once we started the Cassie Project, because I felt like those who came to us, for me, were more important and needed me to help them. So I minimized what happened to me in my past. It was more like, because it had been so long ago and I had been told or forced to just suck it up and keep on moving. How does that, one, is that bad? And yeah. I mean, well, but I felt like I was doing it for the right reasons. And I felt like, because I would listen to someone else's story and I'm like, oh my, Jesus, that didn't happen to me that way. Let me just be quiet, because mine, it happened, but it didn't leave me here, there, or wherever. So I did. I played mine down because I just felt like theirs was so much more traumatic. I think may have been my misperception.
And so to that same example, that trauma can be anything for any person, I absolutely have a pet peeve when people will say, that's not trauma, you weren't in the war. That's not trauma, you didn't get raped. We cannot define what is traumatic for any person.
That's true.
And my story, while it could be hellacious, does not negate or diminish how hellacious your story was. So I got raped 20 times. You got raped once. Both were violations. Both were traumatic.
Yeah.
So to say yours wasn't as serious or bad is to invalidate your experience. And that's one of the worst things I think that we can do for people who have survived trauma, is to invalidate their experience.
Okay.
Now, the thing that happens if we're not careful, it can happen to providers as easily as it can happen to people like yourself, is what's called secondary traumatic stress, or it used to be called vicarious trauma or
Okay.
compassion fatigue,
Okay.
where you can be impacted by the story of another person as much
think
as
I've
you
heard
can
that.
be impacted by yours. You know, if we really are telling the truth, one of the reasons I had this head wrap on today is because I haven't had a chance to get my gray touched up. And that's the result of years of being in this field and not even paying attention to the trauma that I was experiencing by being a helper. That
You know-
happens in ministry, that happens in clinical work, it happens as teachers, because we are hardwired for connection. We are impacted by each other's lives and stories, and we can be as traumatized as the people that we're helping.
And I believe it, you know, and I hear you saying it, but at the time I think I was experiencing it, and my boyfriend, he was like, you know, you really need to take a break. He was like, you are starting to internalize other people's trauma. And I'm like, no, you know, I'm here to help them and I have to such. And then I'm like, you know, I was thinking about so and so. He was like, why are you doing that? And then it's like some of the things that, some of their triggers, I won't say I adopted their triggers, but it
Started to impact you.
it did, and then it made me reconnect with things that had happened, that some of the things I had kind of like pushed back in the back of my mind, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that was me too. And I'm just, so I started acting as though I was being traumatized all over again.
And you were. So one of the things that's a risk factor for secondary traumatic stress is your own trauma. So if there has been exposure to trauma, I am more likely to be traumatized by someone else's story. So there is a study called the ACE study, and that stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences.
Yes.
And to rush on to the part about vicarious trauma, one of the things they're starting to do with that information is actually using it when people are wanting to enlist in the military. Because, again, past trauma is a good predictor of potentially being traumatized or to acquire PTSD.
Yeah.
So not to say people can't be in the military if they've had trauma, but just making sure that proactively we wrap the supports around those individuals to make it less likely that they will experience a traumatic encounter, or they're going to have trauma when they're in war, but not to be as impacted or affected by the trauma, based on us knowing that there are particular curatives and protective factors that can help you not be so traumatized.
That, how do we, or how do I, because I am not a clinician. Like I said, this is a non-clinical initiative, and what we like to do is connect survivors with other survivors for support as we make our way on our journey to life after abuse. So me not being a clinician, how do I protect myself, guard myself, or prevent myself from being re-traumatized by the trauma that I am taking in or listening to from the people who come to me for help?
So shameless plug, go to a therapist. Find a therapist. One, because just like you have a couch here, you know, our offices, we have a couch or a space where you can come and deal with and release your own issues before a person even came and told you their story. So part of it is us helping you to process what happened to you. That way you're not as susceptible to being re-traumatized and or taking on other people's things. The thing about ACEs that's interesting is they've done a lot of studies on why people enter into the social work or the social services field. And most individuals who have done so have a high ACE score. So it's kind of like the person who says, I was in foster care and I want to make sure no other children have to suffer in foster care, and they give their life's work for children in foster care residential programs. So working through your own personal experiences is one of the best things that you can do to not be as susceptible to the trauma and to process the trauma that you are feeling based on hearing it. So when I realized that I had vicarious trauma, some of the telltale signs for me was I couldn't watch certain things on TV. So this was around when CSI and Law and Order were at their height.
I love those shows.
Trauma.
Trauma drama?
Yes,
Trauma? Okay.
absolutely. And what happens is we become addicted to it. You either become very adverse to it or you become very addicted to it, because when we are traumatized, our amygdala, our limbic system is ignited, and that's that adrenaline rush, that's that cortisol, that's that whole thing. And if we're not careful, we get addicted to it. So watching
goodness.
TV, we're having that same cycle. The only thing is we're sitting in our living room. We're sitting in our bedroom, but when that music starts to play, you feel it, and your body is going through that same response.
Oh my
and we can
gosh.
become addicted to that adrenaline.
Okay. Wow. So I don't know. Were you at the conference up in Columbus a couple months ago where Dr. Garcia was the keynote speaker?
No.
Okay. So they were talking about that, and they were showing on the chart how the brain is stimulated by certain drugs, because it was about heroin and opioid addiction. So they were talking about how it was
The
stimulated.
dopamine receptors.
The what?
The dopamine receptors.
Yes. So they were talking about that, and then I just heard you say that. So I'm sitting here tripping because I probably am addicted to things like that, and I don't know. Don't judge me, but I like shows like the shows like the CSI shows, and then the shows the crime and like Snapped and all that stuff. I like to watch that. I mean, not because I like plan on snapping or anything like that, but I guess I have an addiction.
I think sometimes the reason people enjoy that is because it's controlled.
Okay.
So we know at the end of Law and Order, they're going to get the guy. We know at the end the child is going to hopefully be safe. We know that justice is going to be served to some degree.
Okay, good.
You know, if it's
good.
snapped, we know the person's in prison.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a violence that we can control and predict. Very different than what has happened to many people. They are powerless. They were powerless. And so we need...
Is that why I like it though?
I would
Maybe?
imagine that might have something to do with it.
Yeah, so it's okay, because that's interesting. That's interesting because I had no control over my situations. To see these and watch these shows and watch it in a controlled environment, I don't want to say turns me on, but it stimulates my dopamine.
I think there's a sense of power as well around, all right, they got him. Wow. Versus, because if you really think about it, especially like SVU and things like that, those are based on real life stories. When you see the news about that real life story, it's hard to even fathom.
This is true.
But when you watch it on TV, it's like, I mean, you know, it's the same thing, but it's just, there's somehow our brain distinguishes it. So there's a quote, the mind is kind. So it helps us to kind of process things. And even I think with visual types of images and things like that, it's a control. It's not this person just walked up on you in your real life experience and you're really fearing for your life.
The mind is kind. Write that down. The mind is kind. Okay.
So I think that trauma has a lot to do with why you are enjoying that. And it also has a lot to do with why people who, like me on the other side, avoid it at all costs. If you look at my DVD collection, it looks like I probably have 100 kids. I got probably every Disney movie, every PG and below, because I couldn't manage that. I needed something. And I worked in a correctional facility for years. Okay. So I could not do that work and go home and watch CSI. I did not know why I couldn't until later I learned about, secondary traumatic stress. When I learned about it, it was like a light bulb went off and I said, God, that's what's going on with me.
Now, how long have you been practicing?
I started in 2003.
Okay.
So about 15 years almost.
Okay. So I didn't mean to cut you. I was just wondering because you said once you started, So
that wasn't until 2014. So you can imagine for 11 years, started my first job was in a residential group home in Avondale. I was there and then I went to a correctional facility right off of 75. Was there for years. Then I went to a locked substance abuse treatment center for women. So, my first 3 jobs for the first 6 years were very intensive work with a lot of survivors. Now, trauma is a newer buzzword. In the 2000s, everybody was talking about ADHD.
Okay, and then was it like in the 90s where we crazy?
Disorder.
When was crazy? Because crazy, I think, sticks.
Right. It's always been crazy. But when we now factor in the reality of trauma, what is often misdiagnosed as ADHD is misdiagnosed trauma. What's often, people are crazy, it's bipolar. So now we're really, the attention to trauma and the effects of trauma are so much higher because our society is continuing to have more and more trauma. So when you think about the shootings that just happened last week in Florida, I believe the statistic right now is that we've had 18 in 2018. And I remember 1999, I remember being in college when the Columbine shooting occurred. And I remember thinking, or just how, as a society, how outraged we were and how just blown away that something like that could happen. I survived all of my education. I was in college. Now kids these days are having to worry about, is it going to happen today? Is it going to happen? That was the first time I remember ever experiencing something that traumatic. The thing that I remember prior to that was when I was in kindergarten when the space shuttle.
Oh, wow.
So those are
Yeah.
my two kind of mild
Okay.
markers. In the 80s with the space shuttle, to Columbine in the 99, to all of these
Everything
countless. So what people are experiencing has totally heightened. We've had so many tragedies, so many traumatic events. And even if you aren't a part of it, we see it on TV. I remember being a senior in college watching that second plane crash into the Twin Towers.
I was at work that day. Yeah, I was working at the African American Chamber. Yeah.
So we see so much more. We are susceptible to so much more. And it has a way of impacting us, especially at a level that we're not even aware of.
Now, this is kind of a silly question, I know, because
Okay,
everybody
no
is
silly
different.
questions.
Everyone's different, and it takes time. As a parent who never received any clinical diagnosis or clinical assistance or anything like that, when raising our children, in your line of work, how often have you seen our trauma trickle down into our children, or our children be subjected to the effects of our trauma, and then it ends up becoming a cycle all over again with our kids when they become adults?
It happens far too often.
Yeah.
So I, for a long time, would not work with children. I always said I would work with adults. One of the reasons I didn't want to work with children is because I knew that most of what happens to children, they have no control over. It's the adults in their lives that make choices or that create scenarios that impact the children. So I used to think, well, let me work with the adults, because if I can help change the adults,
Yes.
then the adults can create a different experience for the children. In the last couple of years, I started seeing clients at my children at my practice, and my rule was, if I was going to see a child, the parents had to be involved, because it's still a systemic issue. It's a family issue usually. And what I have seen, I've referred so many parents to counseling because I might be working with their 8-year-old or their 9-year-old, and I see very clearly that what the 9-year-old is experiencing is a result of mom and dad who fight in their bedroom, or it's a result of mom has her just an enormous amount of stress and life issues and trying to do their very best and not doing it well. And the child's, so I have one client I can think of where they have moved so much, and the child doesn't have any stability or consistency. The child has absolutely no choice over that. So research shows that 3 of the biggest traumas, the top 3 traumas for children, are loss of a pet, moving, and loss of a grandparent. So I have one particular client who, her parents got a divorce, they moved, she had to go to a new school, and then when her mom got remarried, they had to get rid of their dog. So the dog had to go live with another family member. So they moved, they lost the dog. So the things that she's experiencing have minimal to do with her control. So if we're not careful as parents, as adults, and if we don't do our own work and do our own self-care, which does include therapeutic services at times, it's very possible that our children could be affected. The level of the impact, it varies based on what the situations are and if there's early intervention. I have some parents, and I commend them with everything I have. They'll bring him out and they say, I just want to check and make sure he's all right. He's doing good, but I want to make sure that our divorce isn't affecting them. And that level of early intervention, I've said to parents, he doesn't need to come and see me. I mean, I'm happy to talk with him, but he doesn't have a diagnosis. He's fine. Keep doing what you're doing, those kinds of things. That early intervention is so paramount. And we, especially in the African American community, we do not do that enough.
Yeah, never heard of such a thing. I can't say that I know any friends. I have one girlfriend who has, I think he's like 6 or 7. So she would do something like that, and she probably has. But for the most part, I don't think that I know of anyone who would have taken that step and said, hey, something's happening in my marriage here, or is going on in the household, let me take the baby to counseling or our child to counseling, just to make sure that they are not being ill affected about that. So go ahead.
And I was just going to say, because we don't put a value on our mental health, really we don't put a strong value on our physical health. We don't go to the doctor when we need to. We don't, we'll go get some Dayquil versus going to get a checkup and things like that. So we don't necessarily prioritize our physical health and mental health. What's that?
Right. Like we have
Why
to
are
worry
we
about
doing
that too? What?
And if anything, mental health actually impacts your physical health, which most people don't pay attention to or don't see the connection there. So if we won't even go to the doctor, we're definitely not going to go see a therapist.
Yeah, or a psychiatrist. Yeah. So since we were talking about children, I kind of want to segue into our second guest, and then we're going to come back and talk some more head stuff. She's all in my head. So this young man, I went to an open mic poetry, and I didn't expect someone the age of my child to be there. He's 17. You want to go around the camera? Is that good? Okay. I'm sorry. So it's a 17-year-old young man there, and everybody's doing the open mic thing, and they're doing like this serious poetry and everything. And he got up, and the first time he got up, I was like, wow, this young man has a head on his shoulders, and this is so wonderful to see, because if you look at him, because when we look at young black men, first thing we're going to do is judge them by how they look. And he's not the clean cut, yes sir, yes ma'am, he might say that, I don't know, but suit wearing, tie, whatever. He's not one of those guys. He's our everyday teenage son. And so I did a piece. I ended up sharing about the Cassie Project, and shared flowers, which if you are a follower of the Cassie Project, you are familiar with, or you can always see it on our website. And he came to me afterwards, and it touched him. And that touched me because, one, to me, he's still a baby, and for him to have any feedback on what I had to say about what happened to my girlfriend who was murdered, and about the fact that I'm a survivor and I'm old enough to be his mom, that meant something to me. And he said, well, I have a piece that I want to share with you. I have something that I did. And so he got up and he did a piece. And if you don't know, my background is childhood molestation, sexual abuse, and rape. And he did this piece. And I was like, yeah, so the show is next Tuesday. And if you could come to the studio and share this with our audience, that would be amazing. So without further ado, we're going to talk to him as well. But I first want to introduce you to Rockin'. I know that sounds different, not like Rockin' Robin. It sounds like Rockin' Robin, but it's not spelled like that. Anyway, he's at the microphone, so let me send it over to you. Welcome, 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 honey.
Thank you, I appreciate it. I wrote this not too long ago. I hope you guys enjoy it. We open the book towards nonfiction, a story with no action, but suspension. Stories with beginnings and middles and no conclusion, 'cause they spoke up. Most people had no movement, the world of the ruthless. Most people are clueless, 'cause the victim's too scared to speak up, 'cause the offender might leave him toothless. Now we living in this world with other people acting stupid. Young females getting choked, messed up, molested with no buts, been controlled their whole life. God, this ain't right. No wonder they can't believe in you. It's silent when they give plight. And the way they built, they can barely even fight. 7 to 15 dreams demolished by misters turning tyrants. Now they try their best to hide it. The feelings of non-stop torture. Nobody's around to even come support us, so the lines on the bodies flat as life support us. And nobody really knows the effects that's towards us. So when they run free, we want them D.I.E. 'Cause I'll be shamed if my daughter will be next to be in the grand jury of the Glock 9 finds him guilty. But I'll be jailed 'cause my acts were silly. They watch young girls tormented, young girls suffering, a young girl's innocence. This is how it is. How you get as foul as this? Maybe give you an image 'cause you couldn't feel it. Close your eyes and just picture a blank canvas and listen to a young girl's story I used to hang with. Hear what the pain is. Look into the eyes of a young, sad, ignorant girl you say got baggage and misdeeds and problems for sure. But Lord knows exactly what had occurred. First body, bad memories, haven't you heard? I don't think you heard of her. First virginity taken, 22nd Street vacant, under investigation, little after I dated, not for reasons you thinking back on the subject, okay then? Late in the bedroom, she layin'. Mother walks in like, oh baby, I need you awake the crazy. I hate to say this, but lately, my man's been craving lust like crazy. Can you feed to his temptations? She pauses, thinking that she nodded, declined on the offer, thought it was an option. Mother looked toward her, she screamed and then she scolded her. Guilt trips the folder, gave in to her words. Stepfather stepped towards her, remove your clothes slower. He speaks, getting closer. Close the door and thinking nothing more. It's a school night at 4. Touched and felt scared, pulling in the hair. Abusing it's not shared, spoken but not cared. Discretion was in there. Rape 12-year-old, recorded from the bedroom. Yes, on video you can see her tomb. Blood and sperm on the floor, imagine how she screaming, clawed. Screaming for her mother's help, who was a part of the plot. Believe it or not, this reality shock had her at school, silent as rocks, drowning her thoughts. Suffocation, penetration, no hesitation. It's raining every time the thunder strikes down. He switches to the anus, pain in the back, ain't it? Not a joke, just to play with, no comedy. If you mocking these girls who sadly was given the word abusive, and it hurts. Cause every time I think about it, if it was my sister, cousin, mom, aunt, home girl with a stranger, it'd be post-mortem the way I have him placed on the hanger. I'll investigate the danger.
I don't even, and this is how I was at poetry. I mean, those were, first of all, why does someone your age know that?
Well, I have somebody in my family that actually went from going through domestic abuse. And then I have a lot of female friends that actually went through sexual assault. There was this one girl in my life, she was actually my girlfriend at the time. And pretty much she had told me a story about what she went through with her step-parent. Mm-hmm. And it kind of hit me hard. It hit me harder than I really thought because, of course, I knew sexual abuse and, you know, all that stuff was going on. But the way that she told me and the fact that it was somebody that was supposed to be close to her.
And taking care of her, yeah.
It really, like, had me at an emotional level. So I spent my time with her, like, all the time. I tried to make her happy all the time. I stayed with her. I even told her counselor, like, hey, she's going through this. I really want you to talk to her about this. He actually told her that she's going through PTSD. And so I'm just trying to help her out through the progress. And as days went on, it seemed like it got worse because one day we were sitting outside and she was red, and she was looking out in the distance, just focused on the distance. And I asked her what was wrong, and she thought she saw her stepfather. And I told her, like, nobody's there. And then she was just too focused on the distance, and she started screaming, got up, ran away. So I chased her, got her, asked her what was wrong, and she said, he touched me.
Have you shared this piece with her? She's heard this piece, or?
No, she has not.
Ooh, does she know you wrote it?
Her friend does.
Ooh, okay. Are you still in communication with her?
Trying to get in communication with her. Her friend is actually the only person that's in contact with her right now. But okay. I'm trying my best to figure out a way to get into contact with her because she's only been writing letters.
Okay. So when you share that, like you shared it the other night with us, and then you shared it, of course, here, what type of feedback do you get? Do people think that it's something that you made up, or how do they respond?
There's a few people out there that I share this to, and it's just like, nobody wants to hear about that. Like, it's not what we want to hear. But it's kind of something that you need to hear.
Yeah.
Because I make stuff like this for people to understand what's going on in the world, and it's very serious. Like the shootings, like stuff like that. Like that stuff is really going on and it's serious. And just imagine your daughter, your son, or yourself going through these problems, and you don't even know what to do. People aren't coming to help you. You feeling isolated because you never know what's going to happen.
Your friends, so what high school do you go to? Or are you out of school?
I'm already graduated early.
Where'd you graduate from?
I actually graduated from Dayton Job Corps.
Okay, good for you, good for you.
Thank you.
And so, yeah, I was surprised when I was like, so is your mom here? You were like, no, just me. I'm like, wait a minute. I have a 17-year-old. He ain't going to no TV studio by herself. But I really, I appreciate you coming. Did you have some feedback on that you wanted to share?
First of all, I think it's amazing.
Thank you.
And I think how you have captured the lives and the tales of so many individuals is just amazing. And I was just sitting here thinking about what it would be like to have the world hear your voice and the story that you can tell and the way that you have woven it together in a melodic and poetic way where you are exposing people to the truth. I just was blown away as I was listening to you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And as you were talking, I saw so many different faces in my mind that was resonating with having heard those stories in a safe place like an office. But how many people don't get a chance to tell their story? So you telling that story for them, it's just phenomenal.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I'm so happy that I met you and that you even offered to share your piece with me. And I'm glad that you came. And this is a true testament of healing through the arts. You know, we do that every year. That's our big event in September, Healing Through the Arts. And this is what it's all about. You know, this is just the epitome of why survivors, I believe survivors should look inside themselves to find that healing place within themselves, so that they, as an outlet to heal from their abuse. So do you have a Facebook page or a web page or something where people can go and hear some more of your stuff? Where do you do your poetry?
Yes. I actually just created one not too long ago.
Woohoo.
It is, if you look up Rockin' on Facebook.
Spell them for
it.
me.
It should be a page. It is RAAKIN. I like to make a lot of old school stuff.
Okay.
That's just what I grew up on. But,
So like Rakim, I am.
Basically.
Okay.
over the IN.
Okay.
Two A's.
I got you. I love it. We will be looking you up. Please look him up. At least send him a message and tell him how his piece has affected you, and give him accolades for, you know, being brave enough and to share her story. And eventually when she hears it, I hope that it's received well and that I can help her heal. And maybe, who knows, she may need to speak to Miss Burnett herself.
Maybe.
But thank you so much.
No
You
problem.
don't have to leave right away because I do want to get a picture
Yes.
with you afterwards. So thank you for sharing.
No problem.
Love, love, love. Love young people. I'm glad that somebody his age is recognizing and taking some level of responsibility to address the issues that so many of us, especially from our generation, so many of us have decided to brush under the rug.
And what I appreciate is that he's a male voice.
Yes.
Saying that. I think with the Me Too movement, and I know you said you guys spoke about that in another show, the power, understanding power and privilege, the people who have the power and the people who have the privilege have to use it. And it is no secret that we live in a male or patriarchal society. It is no secret that we live in a white male dominated society. So even when it comes to Me Too, Oprah said something so phenomenal and so sad at the same time when she was receiving her speech that became very famous. She said, you know, to the women who were courageous enough to tell their story and to the men who listened. The challenge that I had with that piece is women have been telling their story forever. It was not validated until a man said, we're going to do something about this. And I feel like that's the sad part. So even when she identified the men who listened.
Now, is that the case? The man, who?
Just men in general. So when you start thinking about people, you know, we've talked sister girl for years. And until people who have power, which is usually men,
This is true.
have said, oh, we're going to fire this person. He did that. We're going to prosecute him. This has been going on since the beginning of time. So what I can appreciate about Rakim is he's a male. So, you know, if we kind of think of the levels of privileges, males will generally always have more power and privilege than females. You and I can write poetry like that all day long.
Yeah.
It's going to be heard and received a different way because he's a male and he's using his voice. He can talk to. So in my profession, I've worked with 90% male throughout the years. And
Really?
it's my absolute favorite population to work with because they're the ones that have the power. They're the ones who have the
90%?
privilege.
Really?
My first job was in a male group home.
Okay.
And I was on a
okay.
male unit for several years in the correctional facility. So that reality of educating and empowering more men, because as I've said to many men, that is someone's daughter. That is someone's sister. That is someone's mother. What would you do if it was your mom, your sister? And that's usually when people get a little bit of empathy. But if people like Raquel can continue to communicate and align men to, first of all, stop doing these things.
Thank you. Thank you.
And then speak up for the people who have no voice. And that's what I think was amazing even about his presentation.
I'm glad you were here for that. I'm glad you were able to give those words to him as well. I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that you will be able to take it. He's sitting off camera right now, but I'm hoping that you will be able to, take what she said, take what I've said, and other people who have encouraged you to continue doing what you're doing and speak for those of us who don't have voices, like your friend. So thank you so much. I appreciate that. So we've got some more time left.
Okay.
I want to talk about some of the other things that you do. You said, I've got this business, that business. I do this and I go here and I do that and I do this. And so I'm like, you can pick one. But there's, you have the one that I guess most of them work with the women. Just give us some of the other things that you do.
So my two most important projects right now are the Queen Size Mission, which we just recently changed our name. We used to be called Queen Size Women's Empowerment Ministry, but now we've changed our name to the Queen Size Mission.
I like that.
One, because we feel like this is a mandate and a mission that God has given us, and it takes someone with the size of a queen to carry it.
Okay.
A lot of times we think about queen size couches or beds, or we think about it measuring a size, but the size is queen, and this is a big space that needs to be filled and can only be filled by queens.
Okay.
So what our purpose is to continue to educate, liberate, and empower women to really connect with their royal identity. I believe, that God is the king and we are connected to him as his daughters and his queens. And based on who God is, it dictates how I am.
Okay.
My pastor often teaches a wrong view of God means a wrong view of self. And a wrong view of self means a wrong view of God.
Yeah.
And so really helping people to understand who God is and then understand who we are in connection to him. So, part of our mission is to empower women to walk in their royal identity. So our arm of that's also for young ladies, is called Generation Princess. So raising them to be queens, raising them to have the identity so that they don't even have to go through some of the things the queens are recovering from and healing from, hopefully being able to spare them through modeling and empowering them to take a different step. So an example of that, one of the things we did for a retreat, we went to Indianapolis, right in the fashion district of Indianapolis, and we stayed right in there, and we went to stores, and I had a plan. I was going to Tiffany and Company, and I took these young ladies into Tiffany and Company and just talked about, quality of life things. I can buy these things because I work hard and I have this experience. We went into Burberry, and we went into all of these stores that I only had enough money for Tiffany, but we went into all of these different places to show them, like, there's more to life than you have probably seen, or what media will show you your end is going to be. There's a lot of propaganda around welfare queens and the ghetto and the black community, but really showing them what life on a higher level looks like, even just by making different choices. Make a choice to study, so you get a good grade, so you get a scholarship, so you go to college, and now you have a degree, and you have a choice of where you want to work, where you want to live. And I'm not saying that college is the end-all, be-all, but making different choices so you can have a different life if that's what you would like.
Okay.
So our mission is to continue to educate and empower women. Our other primary focus is helping women who are coming out of human trafficking, really raising awareness around human trafficking, raising awareness around not only just sexual human trafficking, but even labor human trafficking. any situation where people are not free to make their own decisions, which can also include, domestic violence situations and things like
Yeah,
that. So that's our mandate as well. I believe when I first started to hear and learn about the reality of human trafficking and the closeness of human trafficking to us, because a lot of times we think about it as it's over in the Philippines or it's in foreign countries, but Toledo is the 4th largest city or the 5th largest city in the world for trafficking.
Yeah, we just went to I guess a workshop or a talk back or something about human trafficking. And I live in Mason, and they were saying that one of the places out there where I live is a huge hub for trafficking. And I'm like, what? And when you say Mason, you automatically think, okay, bougie, blah, 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 blah. And you're like, wow, is that really happening out there?
Absolutely.
You move out there thinking that, I'm putting my son in Sycamore. I'm like, okay, so we're going to be in a better neighborhood where, people have better family values and things like that. And then to find out that this is happening like around the corner.
And it's more than likely to happen in a more affluent neighborhood, because when it comes down to specifically sex trafficking, the going rate for a sexual act is about $450. So when you think about who affords that, who can afford those kinds of things, the highest days around PGA
I don't know who's buying that. I mean, who's
So it just helps you to, it helps you to realize, there's a difference, and neither is right, but there is a difference in a person who maybe is prostituting herself to get a $20 crack rock and a person who's being prostituted for maybe $600 per act. And usually they have choice is not a factor in those things. So we really do a lot of work on educating and empowering. We've partnered with some programs like End Slavery Cincinnati and just different individuals. One, because we want to raise the awareness. And it is our vision that if this is an evil that is enacted mainly on women, then who better but women to rise up and fight it? Force meets force. And that's something that we are really strongly working towards.
Have you connected with Urban Outreach?
No.
Okay, that they also are very strong in human, and they go into it, like they get the phone calls with domestic violence and they go in and take the women out of those situations. So I would love to get you connected with them.
Absolutely, we'd love to do so.
So yes, they were guests here on the show as well. So what about some of the other things that you're doing?
The other thing is my personal speaking and empowerment company called The Crown. And The Crown stands for Total Healing Experiences, Creating, Restoring, Overcoming, Winning Now.
Gotcha.
And through that's where I utilize and do a lot of the public speaking and education. I actually just finished my first book. Hopefully that will be back from print around the middle of March.
Wonderful. And what's that about?
It's called Long May You Reign. And it is about helping people to step into their royal identity, really living life on a higher level as well. So I'm really excited about that. I have a list of books in my head, and I have all these things that I'm going to write at some point. But so that one should be out hopefully by the end of March.
Okay.
Yes.
That sounds wonderful. Now, to quickly go back to your therapist hat.
Okay.
You deal with any and everyone. Is that accurate? Because
That is
I know
accurate.
we had a conversation about family therapy and how important that can be as well. And you do families.
Yes. Especially, like I said, with children, I don't think it's going to be as effective to just solely work with the child, because the child is a part of a system and the child doesn't have as much autonomy or authority in the system. So really working to change or challenge the entire system. One of the things that I love about the practice where I am is that we are very connected and referring. So I might see a child and I see that the mother needs some help, and I'll say, I got somebody I need you to see. Or we're able to make those referrals smoother instead of people trying to start all over again and find a new referral. And so it's not uncommon for therapists to be treating people in a family, because mom's seeing someone, dad's seeing someone, and the kids are seeing someone. And that's it's so much better than I think back through my earlier years of trying to work with one person and there's 17 other people that are a part of this equation, and you don't have a lot of impact into that. So being able to help people get connected. One of the things I say to moms or dads, I say, I need you to see someone. Now I'm happy to give you a referral, happy to get you connected to someone here. You can find your own, but this is the thing that everyone is impacted by.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right. Well, I love that. And before we get out of here, because the clock is ticking, I want to ask Rakin to come back up here. Rakin, please.
Can I say one more thing while he's coming?
Of course, yes.
We are
come behind the
having
cameras, baby. Come that way.
we are having a conference.
Can you? Okay. Come on.
We are having a conference on March 23rd and 24th with
Okay.
the Queen Size Mission. It's called I Am That Girl.
Okay.
And you can go to you can look up my name on Facebook to get more information about it, but we'd love for any of the women to come, young ladies to come. It's about really empowering people. You know, some of our sessions are I'm the girl who survived. I'm the girl who owns the business.
I love.
I'm the girl that you marry.
Okay.
So just really looking at empowering women to step up into their identity. Like, I'm that girl.
Okay.
Not
Spell your
that
name.
one.
Spell your name real quick for us in case they want to go to your website.
So it's DANISHA BURNETT, and you can look up the Queen Sized Mission on
Queen
Facebook
Size
or
Mission.
Instagram.
I love that. I'm going to have to link to that. I love,
Please
love.
do.
Now, of course, a part of sharing on the couch, even if you're not a survivor, we have survivors and supporters. And I ask that when you sign, that you sign for her and all the other young women that you speak for. That would really mean a lot to me, and I think that would mean a lot to a lot of other young women as well. So, and then of course, Ms. Denisha, we're going to have you sign. So you can sign anywhere you like. Anywhere you like. And keep in mind that we've got a camera, so I had one lady actually put her butt in, she was signing and it was like all backside. So let's not have a backside shot today.
I'm gonna just right here.
Yeah, wherever you like, if you want to kneel down maybe. And
I'll do it right.
Okay, that works. And in the meantime, do you have a direct number that you'd like to give out?
Sure. I can be reached if individuals would like consulting or counseling. You can reach me at 454-7978. So 513-454-7978.
Okay.
Or you can go to thecrownllc.org.
All right, and we can inbox you.
Correct.
At the Queen Sized Mission.
Correct.
Yes. May I please have your signature?
It would be my pleasure.
I love this part of it. And just in case you don't know, the Cassie Project has 3.5 couches full of signatures already from survivors and supporters of the project over the years. We're 5 years old and we're still moving and pressing forward, trying to reach as many survivors as we possibly can. If you'd like to be a part of our movement to share, heal, and live, please look us up. We are at thecassieproject.org. You can find me on Facebook, Chris Stiles. You can find the Cassie Project on Facebook. And of course, any of our other team members, you'll see us there. And just reach out and let us know. And if you'd like to participate in our annual Healing Through the Arts, if you are a survivor who has a performing gift or talent and you want to contribute and come out and share how you have used that gift or talent to heal from your abusive past, please reach out to us. We'd love to have you as a part of the event. It'll be it's our 3rd year, and 3 is like my magic number. You know that song, 3 is a magic number. Anyway, so this will be our 3rd year, and so it's going to be bigger and even better than before. So I'm really, really excited to have that happen. So we're wrapping it up. We're going to get out of here for this edition of Cassie Live. Thank you so much to my guests.
Thank you for having me.
Miss Denisha Burnett, Alphabet Soup, and of course, our poet who knows it, 17-year-old Rockin'. Thank you so much for joining us. If you missed any portion of the show, you can always see us on the website. See you next time. Bye.
I've been through the fire, I've been through the rain. I've been through some heartaches and been through the shame. In all of life's struggles, I depended on you. And through it all, you brought me through. I made it over, I made it through. No more guilt and shame, I'm leaning on you. I made it over.